Hey, for all the authors that are listening out there, I wanted to share with you this great email that we received here at the Reading with Your Kids podcast from Dr. Linda Mubarak. She is a past guest and the author of Maxine's New Job. Here's the email. Dear Fatima and Jed, good news! Maxine's New Job has been nominated to receive the prestigious Henri Award at the 2018 Christian Literacy Awards for Outstanding Literacy Work in the Children's Book Division. I sincerely believe your certifying Maxine as a great read helped bring increased social media attention to the book. Thank you for the exposure and the great marketing. We are so happy for Dr. Linda Mubarak that her book, Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read, Maxine's New Job, received this prestigious recognition. We would love to help your book receive that same kind of recognition. If you are interested in having your book considered for our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program, please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can click on the contact button, send us a note, and we'll send all the information back to you, or you can go right to our Certified Great Read page on our website. It's fun, it's easy, and it is really an effective way to let the world know that your book stands out above all the rest. The Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program.
Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is coming to us from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. She is the author of I Am Empathetic. Her name is Amanda Cottrell. Amanda, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. I was mentioning earlier, and then I ran out of steam, so we started over again. I'm looking at Amanda, and she has this beautiful painting behind her. It's very colorful, and she was telling me that she painted it herself. So I guess you are an author and an illustrator.
Yeah. Actually, my daughter and I paint together lots of the time. So all of the paintings in our house are done by the two of us together.
Wow. How old is your daughter?
She's 9 now, but when we painted the one behind me, I think she was about 4. So there's little blue footprints all over the floor in my basement for a long time.
Well, there are paint footprints from me all over the place here, but it was accidental, not on purpose. And it was well, that's a great thing. You know, we celebrate reading with your kids here, and that's just a part of what we encourage families to do. We absolutely want families to read together with their kids. It's a great way for them to help develop a love of learning. It's a great way for them to develop their vocabulary. It is a fantastic way to help them develop a sense of empathy. But it's also real important to remember that the times that we spend cooking with our kids and painting with our kids, they're so very, very valuable. So hats off to you and your daughter for making that tradition in your home and then celebrating it by displaying the art all over your home.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do with her is to paint. And she always talks about painting at school. And she's a very talented artist already, which is amazing.
Yeah. It is amazing what kids can do at such a young age, isn't it?
It really is. Being a teacher, I'm always amazed by what the kids can do. I've taught grade 3 for the last 9 years. I've taught for about 15 years now, but for the last 9 years I've been in grade 3, and they always teach me more than I teach them.
It is, and it's one of the things too. You know, there are certainly some typical things that most 8-year-olds do, and you can say, well, most 8-year-olds can do this and they can't do that. But we have to remember that the word most doesn't mean all. And kids can have a really incredible range of talents and abilities. And one of the things that I'm always amazed at is how empathetic kids at a young age can be. I mean, again, it's a spectrum, but there are some kids that have such empathy and feeling for others, it's really inspiring to me.
Yeah, it really is true. Always in my class, there's always a big spectrum of abilities and strengths and areas that kids just shine in. And some kids are just definitely have that gift of empathy where they can be in a group with anyone and they can work with anyone, even somebody that all the other kids in the class struggle with. They are able to just like embrace them and really like build a friendship with them, and they can work with anyone in the class. Those are always the kids that I'm like, wow, you are amazing.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a day that when my daughter was in kindergarten, she had this one kid in her class that had a lot of extra energy and probably a lot of anxiety, and he wasn't able to line up with the rest of the kids, and he would just jump up anytime it was time to move from one place to another, jump up and literally run out of the classroom ahead of everybody. And in fact, he started running out of the school, and people were getting concerned that it was unsafe for him to be there. And then one day, without any prompting from anybody else, when the teacher said it's time to line up, and this one kid jumped up to run, my daughter just stood up with him and just held his hand.
Yeah.
And brought him over to the line. And then she just started doing that for the rest of the year. And her teacher came out and was like, your daughter is so amazing. She's so beautiful. I can't, and told me the story. And I was incredibly proud of her. But I'm guessing from the title of your book, I Am Empathetic, you are coming from a place where our kids can learn how to be empathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, what I'm seeing as a teacher is that there's so much disconnect with kids, and lots of kids are not as socially, they don't have the social skills that they did when I first started teaching. And I believe that a lot of it is due to technology, and that there's not so much face-to-face. You don't just go to the playground and play anymore with random kids. You like have play dates that are scheduled by your parents. You are constantly in this activity or that activity. It's like soccer, yoga, hockey, then you have piano practice, and there's no time for them just to be kids and to learn that empathy naturally. And that's something that I really think is important. I think it's important for kids to be bored and for kids to have some time just alone where it's not scheduled. And that's something that's really missing. Not right now because of COVID, but I think COVID is actually really good in some ways because it's giving kids that time to just sit and not be constantly overscheduled. And so empathy is something that I'm seeing a lack of in the classroom. And it's also something that we're really focusing on because it, especially in Canada in teaching, is that there's this hidden curriculum that it's not all about the academics. It really is about how we make others feel, how we can interact, how we can collaborate, how we can inspire others. It's not just about rote memorization anymore. To be successful in today's society means you have to have those social abilities. You have to be able to think outside the box. You don't just need to be able to remember facts that the teacher tells you.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I've in different podcasts that I've produced, I've had the opportunity to speak to captains of industry from all over the world. And one of the things they all said is that we can teach how to do the job. Someone can come in here with, it doesn't matter what degree they have or don't have. For the most part, 90% of the people who come through our doors, we can teach them how to do the job. We can't teach them how to get along with others. And that's the biggest challenge that they find, is they have all these people applying for jobs that have this degree and that degree and multiple degrees and just this a CV that is amazing, but they can't work with a team at all.
Absolutely, and that's something that a lot of gifted kids tend to have, is they're so brilliant, but they don't have the ability to work with other kids. So developing empathy for them and really teaching them empathy is something that we really need to focus on in education. And in general, like there's people who are so focused on self that it's that me to we movement, right? Where it's not just all about me. It's how can we help others? How can we live in this world all together. So how can we work to make the world a better place together? Because you can't make the world run as an individual.
I mean, that one sentence that you just said, there's so much in there. First off, I want to comment about that whole idea of we talk a lot about taking kids who don't have empathy and teaching them how to be more empathetic. But you started by saying we have to have empathy for them. And I think that's something that a lot of us forget, is that it kind of stinks to not be able to have empathy for others.
Absolutely. I think that everybody has their own unique gifts, and there's some kids in the class that really struggle with being able to get along with others or really struggle with academics, and just having empathy for where they're coming from. Like there's some kids that come to school with no food, or their parents just got in a big fight, or their parents are divorcing, and we don't know why they're coming to school angry or upset or crying, or if they come to school and they're in a great mood because their parents just bought them a new video game. We don't have control over that, but we have control over how we treat people when they come into the classroom, or how we treat people when we walk across the street or in a grocery store. If you see somebody who's crying or something, you don't know why, or why they would freak out over something that you think is like completely unnormal for somebody to freak out about. So I see that in the classroom a lot, where somebody will be like, you touched my pencil, and they blow up. But really, it's because they got into a fight with their brother before they came to school, or they didn't eat that morning or something.
Yeah. So let's talk specifically about I Am Empathetic. What's the story that we're going to experience as we pick up that book?
So really it is teaching them what empathetic is. So the book says I am empathetic, and that's a really hard word. So it starts with what? I can't even pronounce that word. What does it mean? And so it says, well, empathetic means to be able to understand the feelings of others. And then it goes into all these different ways that you can show empathy. And then the kid at the end goes, oh, I think I am empathetic too. But he doesn't realize it at the start.
Yeah. It is a big word. It's a big word that there are not enough adults who think about it. You know, we talked earlier about the fact that some people just seem to be born with more empathy than others. But I think a lot of it comes down to being willing to acknowledge that other people have feelings, and to shift our focus that you mentioned earlier, from me to we. That's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really interesting when I first published this book last September, because I self-publish. I do all of the illustrations myself. I do the editing. I get some of my friends that are teachers to read my books before I publish them, and then I do it all on Amazon myself. And right after I published this one, our principal was talking in September about this book called The Unselfie, Why Empathetic Kids Succeed in a World That's All About Me. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I just published this book called I Am Empathetic, and now my principal is talking about how we should read this book, The Unselfie, and it talks all about how kids who are empathetic actually tend to succeed more, and why. And so I thought, well, this is perfect, and how perfectly timing that my book just came out when my principal is talking about this. And that means that our whole system is talking about how we can promote empathy in kids across the whole school board.
Yeah. It's interesting. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but I want to dive in deeper. The whole idea, you mentioned that you've noticed kids are a lot less empathetic these days, and you're thinking that part of it could be, you mentioned two possible causes. One is social media, and the other is the being overscheduled. Talk a little bit about how you think social media might be impacting kids and technology.
Well, I even noticed that in my daughter, where she sees things on TikTok, or she sees things on the YouTube things that she watches, like the kids' YouTube, and she'll start acting like more selfish, or more like she has to look in the mirror more, or she's putting on makeup and she's only 9. And I'm like, this is a little bit concerning that she's seeing all of these images all the time, and then you see them on TV. People used to be concerned about it when you saw it on TV, but I feel like now you can't get away from all of the images. It's on the television, it's on your phone, it's on your iPad. It's everywhere you look. There's images of people who are showing this like perfect, like, oh, you'll be beautiful if you do this, or the only way to be happy is if you're a hockey superstar or something like that. And it's really hard for kids to recognize that. I notice a lot, especially by the time they get to grade 3, they'll be like, I can't draw, or because they see other people who are amazing drawers, and all of a sudden they're like, I can't draw, or I can't write. I can barely write a sentence, so I can't write. Or I'm not creative. They'll say, at grade 3, like, whereas in kindergarten or before school, they'll be like, I can draw, I love painting, and they'll just dig in and get messy. And even I started a business a few years ago. It's called Art, Mindfulness, and Creativity. And I just do workshops and stuff on art. And I teach adults too how to draw, or like we'll do wine glass paintings, or I teach them how to do mandalas, or whatever it is that they want to learn about art. And kids will just dive in and get the paint and start getting messy, whereas adults, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'm like, just start, like, just get messy, just throw some paint on the canvas, just start. But the adults are so tentative to use the supplies, whereas kids will just dig in and dump it everywhere, whereas adults will be like, it's okay, go get the paint. Yeah. Kids will not wait till the instructions are over, and they just want to start because they are not so concerned about what others think. And just that empathy piece of understanding that we have our own creative gifts. And I think that really at a younger and younger age is starting to get taken away from us, where people think like, oh, I'm not as good as them, so I'm not even going to try.
That's really sad. When you think about it, and you were talking about, when you were growing up, you had television. When I was growing up, we had radio. We had a little bit of television. But those mediums, for a lot of that, it was meant to be shared. And even if you were watching TV by yourself, it was further away. There was noise in the background. You heard your folks cooking in the kitchen. There was a dog on your lap. A cat walked across the screen. Whatever. Today, it's much more immersive. Kids have their earbuds in. They're watching something that's on their whatever device that they're looking at, and then that's it. The world is shut out, and they're just focused in on that message. And a lot of times those messages, like you say, are telling them they're not good enough. They're not as talented. They're not as pretty as they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that's really hard for kids right now, is that constant, it never shuts off. And I think right now we really need to focus on getting kids back into nature, getting kids back into exploring. And one thing that we talk about in school is technology a good thing or a bad thing? And I was like, well, it really depends on what you're using the technology for. Are you being a passive consumer where you're just absorbing the technology and not really thinking about it, or seeing all of those constant images? Or are you using it to create something? Because if you're using it to create something, then by all means, it is an amazing tool. Mm-hmm. But if you're just being a passive consumer for hours and hours on end, then there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And so whenever people say like, oh, there's too much technology in schools or something, I say, well, what are you using it for?
Right. Yeah.
So if you're using it to be creative, it is an amazing, absolutely unbelievably powerful tool. And I always say to my daughter too, like, you have 1 hour of technology a day. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. But if you're using it to be creative, then you can use it for as long as you want. Yep. So if you are using the technology to be creative, to draw on Procreate, or to learn how to draw, if you're watching drawing videos, if you're using it to be creative, then by all means, you can use it for longer. But if you're just passively watching things on YouTube or on TikTok, you get an hour and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've always talked to my kids as they were growing up, and then to kids that I'm speaking with at my educational magic shows. Technology is a tool. It's just like a hammer. And you can use a hammer to build something. You can also use a hammer to destroy something. So technology isn't good or bad. It's a thing that we use, and how we use it, that's where it's good and bad. Hey, Amanda, what are 3 things parents can do to help kids develop that empathy that we want them to have?
Well, I think the first thing is to model it. So kids learn by watching us. So modeling would be the first thing that they can do. The second thing would be when they notice kids being empathetic, or when they notice, or when they see somebody else being empathetic, talk to your kids about it. And then, of course, the third thing would be to buy my book, or also but just talking, absolutely talking, showing kids, modeling, giving them situations where they can be empathetic, where they can donate. Like my daughter, when she was little, every time we would go to the grocery store, there was this like dog that had like a dollar thing like a money thing in the top. It was like a plastic dog at the store. And every time we went by it, she'd be like, "Mommy, I need some change." And she would go in and put money in. And every single time she wanted to go there and put money in. So that's a huge empathy piece. It was like, "Mom, I want to donate money every time we come here." And just modeling that for her, not just saying like, "Oh, no, we don't have any change." Like, "Well, I've got some change. Here you go." Like that's a huge piece. And then she'd ask, like, "What is the dog for?" "Well, it's to help blind people, who need seeing eye dogs. That's where that money goes for this particular charity." And so I think really modeling that and noticing just places in your everyday life where you can show empathy.
Yeah. So very important, that whole modeling thing, so much more powerful than lecturing kids. And I know you joked about buying your book is a great way to talk about, but it is. It's sitting down and reading a book specifically about empathy can lay a foundation, I think, so that when we're reading other stories with kids, we can use the word and say, "Hey, who was empathetic in this story?"
Yeah, I was just going to say that, because once you know about empathy, then when you read other books and chapter books and when you watch movies even, then you could talk about, well, which kids were showing empathy in that movie, or which kid wasn't showing empathy, right? And how could that kid have changed that in the movie or in the chapter book that you're reading?
Yeah. And another great exercise that I think is fun when we're experiencing media together with our kids, whether it's a book or a movie or a video. I don't know how much talking you can do about a TikTok video. Perhaps you can have a discussion, but I don't know. But just putting out there to the kids is like, hey, how would this story be different if so-and-so had acted more empathetically? What could they have done that would have been more empathetic, and how would that have changed the story? Would it have been better? Would it have been worse? And getting your kids thinking in that way, I think, can be a very powerful experience for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that thinking piece, when you really get them to think deeply about something, that's when we see things changing. That's when we see them getting ideas to think outside the box and to be more creative and to be more empathetic and to be more entrepreneurial.
Now, we've been talking, this has been such a great conversation. There's so much we can talk about. This isn't your first book. You've also, you've been out there writing and illustrating other books. Can you tell us about a couple of the other ones?
Yeah, my very first book was called It's Okay to Feel, and it's all of the feelings that you possibly have, and then just questions to ask kids about it. So that was my very first book. And that book, when I first published it, my plan was just to publish it in my classroom and not get it out to the world. And then I met the right people to teach me how to get books up on Amazon and how to self-publish. And so it became an actual book that people could buy. And that first year, I had a student who would take my book and he would go hide under the table, and then he'd flip through the book and find his feeling, and then he'd point to it because he would just be so upset that he couldn't even talk. And And then I'd be like, oh, is that how you're feeling? Do you want to draw about it? And then he would draw about his feelings. So that's how that book is a really good tool for kids. I have another book that I co-authored with a girlfriend who is a jewelry designer and yoga teacher. She creates like spiritual jewelry, and it's called I Am Fearless, a yoga story for kids and superheroes. And so it's a whole bunch of yoga poses with I am statements, and it's about empowering kids on I am balanced, I am powerful, I am grounded, all of these different I am statements to teach kids.
Awesome. Well, I know folks are going to want to know where they can connect with Amanda Cottrell online and learn more about you and learn more about your great books.
Yeah, I have a website. It's called artmindfulnessandcreativity.com. And then my Instagram and Facebook website is the same, Art, Mindfulness, and Creativity.
Awesome. We've had a really enlightening experience speaking to the author of I Am Empathetic, Amanda Cottrell. Amanda, thanks so much for being with us on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been so fantastic.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Farhan Khalid. He's returning to the show to tell us about his brand new picture book, Cars Go Vroom. That's the next edition of the podcast. Hey, you heard earlier the letter that Dr. Linda Mubarak sent to us praising and celebrating our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. If you are the author of a great children's book and you are struggling to let the world know all about it, this may be the program that really, really helps you out. You can find out more by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, clicking on the Author Services button at the top of the page. We'll let you know all about it. I want to let you know about all the people who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Amanda Cottrell. Please be sure to check out I Am Empathetic. Also want to thank my incredible team, starting with my producer, Fatima Khan, my awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of the support that she gives me. But most of all, I want to thank you. You have been incredible. Just a few months ago, you were thrown into a position where human parents never experienced before. Suddenly, your life was turned upside down. Your job went from traveling and commuting into your job to suddenly working at home, or even worse, not having a job at all. Suddenly, you became your kids' teachers. It was a struggle, but you got through it. You did wonderful, and we want to salute you for that. We want to thank you for that, because you are making the world a better place. And please continue to do that by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.